Today I would like to invite you to listen to the Dhammapada of the Buddha Shakyamuni, the 136th verse from the Buddhist scriptures on the YouTube channel Thien Thai in the USA. So, when a fool does wrong deeds, he does not realize their evil nature. By his own deeds the stupid man is tormented like one burnt by fire. Thus the Blessed One spoke with a heart vast and clear, revealing a truth that does not accuse, yet never hides. In the time when the Buddha walked upon the earth, there lived a man whose mind was clouded by ignorance and whose actions were shaped by desire and anger. He harmed others through careless speech and cruel intention, believing that because no one confronted him, no harm would return. His days passed in comfort, his nights in rest, and his heart felt no immediate pain. The Buddha, seeing with wisdom beyond surface appearances, taught that the fire of unwholesome action does not always burn at once. It smolders within the mind, fed by ignorance, waiting for conditions to mature. Just as a hand placed into flame cannot escape the heat, a mind immersed in harmful deeds cannot escape the ripening of its own intentions. When the time came, suffering arose not as punishment, but as consequence. Fear emerged where confidence once lived. Regret appeared where pride once stood. The man was tormented not by an external force, but by the echo of his own actions returning to his heart. The Buddha shared this story not to shame, but to awaken. He taught that ignorance blinds beings to the nature of their deeds, and that foolishness is not a lack of intelligence, but a lack of awareness. When mindfulness is absent, wrong actions appear sweet at first and bitter later. When wisdom is present, restraint appears difficult at first and peaceful later. The verse speaks gently yet firmly, reminding all beings that karma is intimate, precise, and unavoidable, yet also compassionate. For it teaches through experience. Fire does not hate the hand that touches it, yet it burns according to its nature. In the same way, actions bear fruit according to their quality. The Buddha's words invite reflection rather than fear, encouraging beings to observe the movements of their own minds, to recognize that suffering begins not in the world but in intention, and that liberation begins with seeing clearly. The true story carried within this verse is a mirror offered to all, showing that no one is condemned by birth or past mistakes, but that every moment holds the power of choice. When one understands this, heedlessness gives way to care, cruelty softens into compassion, and the fire of suffering transforms into the light of wisdom. Thus the verse stands as both warning and refuge, guiding beings away from harm and toward peace, revealing that the path of Dharma begins with knowing that every deed shapes the heart, and every heart shapes the world. Thus the teaching flows onward like a quiet river, inviting the mind to pause and listen deeply. The wise reflect upon cause and condition, seeing that nothing arises alone and nothing fades without leaving a trace. Every thought is a seed, every word a breath shaping the inner world, every action a step upon the unseen path of becoming. When the heart moves without awareness, it drifts like a boat without a rudder, carried by currents of habit and craving. When the heart is guided by mindfulness, it becomes steady, able to cross even turbulent waters. The Dharma speaks softly here, reminding beings that the present moment is the meeting place of past intentions and future possibilities. What we experience now is the echo of what has been nurtured before, and what we nurture now will become the voice that speaks later. This is not fate carved in stone, but a living process, flexible and responsive to understanding. When one begins to see this, responsibility is no longer a burden but a freedom. The practitioner understands that no external power determines joy or sorrow, and thus the heart turns inward with honesty rather than blame. In this turning, there is courage, for it is not easy to look directly at one's own mind. Yet the Buddha assures that this looking is the beginning of release. Just as light entering a dark room does not argue with the darkness, but simply reveals what is there, wisdom illuminates habits without judgment. The Dharma teaches that ignorance thrives in haste and distraction, while insight grows in stillness and careful attention. Therefore, one learns to slow down, to breathe with awareness, to let actions arise from clarity rather than impulse. In such a life, restraint is not repression but protection, like a fence around a young tree, so it may grow straight and strong. Compassion naturally follows understanding, because when one sees how suffering is born from unawareness, harshness loses its appeal. One no longer wishes to add fire to fire, pain to pain. Instead, kindness becomes a refuge, patience becomes strength, and humility becomes wisdom. The Dharma does not demand perfection, only sincerity. Even when one stumbles, awareness can transform falling into learning. Each moment of recognition weakens the old patterns and nourishes new ones rooted in peace. The Buddha's path is gentle because it aligns with nature, not against it. Just as water finds its way around obstacles without force, the mindful heart moves through difficulties without creating more struggle. When anger arises, it is known as anger and allowed to pass without command. When desire arises, it is seen as desire and understood without feeding. In this way, the fires that once burned the heart are slowly deprived of fuel. Calm grows not because the world becomes quiet, but because the mind learns to rest without clinging. This resting is not indifference, but deep presence. It is the presence that listens fully, speaks truthfully, and acts carefully. Such a life benefits not only oneself, but all beings encountered along the way. The Dharma reminds us that we do not walk this path alone, for every thought influences the shared field of existence. When one heart becomes gentle, the world becomes slightly softer. When one mind becomes clear, confusion loses some of its power. Thus, practice is both personal and universal, intimate and boundless. The Buddha's words encourage perseverance without tension, effort without strain, and faith grounded in direct experience. Over time, the practitioner comes to trust the law of cause and effect not as a threat, but as a teacher. One learns that suffering is a message pointing toward change, and happiness is a confirmation of harmony. In this understanding, fear diminishes and confidence grows. Life is no longer a series of accidents, but a meaningful unfolding shaped by awareness. This is the peace the Dharma offers, not a promise of comfort, but a path to freedom through seeing clearly, acting wisely, and loving without condition. The stream of understanding continues to deepen, like roots reaching further into fertile ground. When one walks with the Dharma as a companion, daily life itself becomes the teacher. Ordinary moments reveal extraordinary truth. A single breath shows impermanence. A single reaction shows attachment. A single pause shows freedom. The Buddha did not ask beings to escape the world, but to see it clearly, to live within it without being consumed by it. Through mindful awareness, one learns that the mind often moves faster than wisdom, creating stories that harden into suffering. These stories arise from habit, from fear, from the longing to secure what cannot be held. The Dharma gently dissolves these illusions, not by force, but by patient observation. When a thought arises, it is known. When an emotion swells, it is felt fully without resistance. When an urge appears, it is met with kindness rather than obedience. In this way, the practitioner stops feeding the cycles that once ruled the heart. The Buddha taught that restraint blossoms naturally from understanding, just as fruit ripens when the season is right. There is no need for harsh control. There is only the quiet strength of awareness choosing peace again and again. As this strength grows, the mind becomes less reactive and more responsive. Instead of being pushed by circumstances, one begins to meet them with balance. Praise no longer intoxicates. Blame no longer wounds deeply. Gain and loss are seen as passing visitors, not masters of the soul. This equanimity is not coldness, but warmth that does not burn. It allows compassion to flow without exhaustion, generosity to arise without regret, and patience to endure without bitterness. The Dharma speaks here of inner freedom, a freedom not dependent on conditions, but rooted in insight. When one understands that all phenomena arise and pass according to causes, clinging loosens its grip. The heart learns to trust the unfolding of life without grasping for control. This trust is not passive. It is an active alignment with wisdom. One still acts, speaks, and chooses, but with clarity rather than compulsion. Such action leaves no residue of regret, no hidden embers of remorse. Instead, it leaves a sense of lightness, as though the heart has laid down a heavy burden it carried without knowing why. The Buddha described this as living without burning, moving through the world without igniting fires within oneself or others. The practitioner sees that anger harms first the one who holds it, that greed narrows the heart, and that delusion clouds joy. Seeing this clearly, the mind naturally inclines toward wholesome states. Kindness becomes the default response. Honesty becomes effortless. Simplicity becomes attractive. Life feels less crowded, less urgent, more spacious. Even difficulties are met as teachers rather than enemies. Pain is acknowledged without being multiplied by resistance. Loss is mourned without being turned into despair. Uncertainty is faced with humility rather than fear. Through this practice, wisdom matures quietly, without display. There is no need to proclaim understanding. It reveals itself in conduct, in the way one listens, in the way one walks, in the way one treats those who offer nothing in return. The Dharma reminds us that the deepest transformation is often invisible to the eye, but unmistakable to the heart. Over time, the practitioner comes to see that liberation is not elsewhere, not later, not reserved for special beings. It is present in each mindful step, each gentle word, each intention purified by awareness. This realization brings deep gratitude, for the path is no longer seen as a struggle toward a distant goal, but as a homecoming to what has always been available. The Buddha's teaching thus unfolds as a living invitation, asking each being to look honestly, act carefully, and love wisely. In walking this path, one discovers that peace is not the absence of fire in the world, but the absence of fuel in the heart. As understanding matures, the heart begins to rest more deeply in awareness, like a lake settling after wind has passed. The Dharma now reveals a subtler truth, showing that suffering is not only born from obvious harm, but also from subtle clinging, from the quiet insistence that things must be a certain way. The mind learns to observe these movements gently, without condemnation, without self-deception. In this observation there is honesty, and in honesty there is liberation. The Buddha taught that wisdom does not arise from denial, but from clear seeing. Therefore the practitioner allows thoughts to come and go like clouds crossing the sky, no longer chasing them, no longer fighting them. In this spaciousness, insight dawns naturally. One begins to see that the self once defended so fiercely is not a solid entity, but a flowing process shaped by conditions. This seeing loosens fear at its root. When there is no fixed self to protect, insults lose their sting, failure loses its weight, and death itself becomes less frightening. The Dharma speaks here of profound freedom, a freedom that does not depend on becoming someone else, but on understanding what has never been solid to begin with. With this insight, compassion deepens, because one recognizes the shared vulnerability of all beings. Everyone seeks happiness. Everyone fears pain. Everyone acts from causes they do not fully understand. Seeing this, the heart softens naturally. Judgment gives way to empathy. Harshness gives way to care. Even those who act unskillfully are seen not as enemies, but as beings caught in their own confusion. This does not mean harmful actions are ignored. It means they are met with wisdom rather than hatred. The practitioner learns to set boundaries without anger, to speak truth without cruelty, and to stand firm without pride. Such balance is rare and precious. It arises not from technique alone, but from sustained reflection and sincere practice. The Dharma reminds us that liberation is gradual, like dawn breaking over the horizon. At first there is uncertainty, then subtle light, then clarity spreading in all directions. Each step matters. Each moment of awareness counts. Even small acts of mindfulness weaken long-standing habits of ignorance. Over time, the mind becomes a trustworthy companion rather than a restless adversary. Silence becomes nourishing rather than empty. Simplicity becomes fulfilling rather than lacking. The practitioner no longer measures life by accumulation, but by depth. Joy is found not in excess, but in sufficiency. Gratitude arises naturally, for one sees how much suffering has been avoided by careful living. The Dharma teaches that this gratitude itself is a form of wisdom, for it recognizes interdependence. Every breath depends on countless conditions. Every meal reflects the labor of many beings. Every moment of peace is supported by ethical conduct and mindful attention. Seeing this, humility replaces arrogance, and reverence replaces entitlement. The practitioner bows inwardly to life as it is, without needing it to conform to preference. This bowing is not submission, but respect for reality. From this respect flows ease. The heart no longer struggles against the world, and the world no longer feels like a burden. Even when challenges arise, there is confidence in the path. One knows how to return to the breath, how to return to awareness, how to return to kindness. These become inner refuges, always available, never exhausted. The Buddha's teaching thus becomes lived experience rather than concept. It is felt in the body, embodied in speech, expressed through action. Others sense this quiet stability and feel safe in its presence. Without preaching, without display, The practitioner becomes a refuge for others, simply by being grounded in Dharma. This is the natural fruit of understanding, not something claimed, but something recognized by its effect. In this way, the fire of ignorance that once burned unseen is replaced by the light of wisdom that warms without harming, guiding oneself and others toward peace without words. Thank you for watching my video. Namo Amitba. I wish to bring this merit towards all disciples and sentient beings, all of whom will attain Buddhahood. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate your time.